Good morning, Vietnam, and hello, YouTube. Thanks for tuning in again. I know in my last video I said I would do daily broadcasts, but that simply hasn't worked out. I've been quite busy out here in Vietnam. And I've changed my decision. Originally was to go to Thailand in the next couple of months. I don't think that's going to happen, but I will give you more details as it's relevant in the personal life of Justin Otto. To begin with, I wanted to say that rumors of my death were widely exaggerated. It was very unusual to be between work shifts outside of the school that I was going to teach at on, I think it was Friday night. Someone said, I got all these panic messages asking me where I was, if I was still alive, and even someone came to my house, an American friend of mine came to my house looking for me. And everyone was quite scared that I died, and it was such a weird experience to have that. And it's not the first time that's happened to me either. It was quite odd, because I don't know. It's a good feeling in the sense, wow, these people really care about me. They're all looking for me. But it's also a weird feeling, like, yeah, it's amazing how quick people are to believe that. I think it was Albert Camus who said that you don't truly love someone until you picture them dying. Which I think is quite appropriate. It's sort of amazing. Since I heard that quote when I was a teenager or whatever, it's sort of like I've gone through and I've realized that the minute I have that strange thought, and I imagine everyone has this thought at some point where you picture someone you're close to dying, that's when you know that you really love them. Dark stuff, I know. And so I wanted to talk about death at 34 because it reminds me of two other figures that I wanted to go over quickly. And I mean death at 34, at the age of 34, because that's where I am, you know. Year of the Mouse, Year of Big Brother, 1984. It's kind of, I always thought this would be an old age when I was younger, but really I feel like I'm at the beginning of things. And so 34, I mean, I've heard that like 30s is the new 20s, and so I'm trying to express that as much as I can in my life. Anyway, I saw another repeat of this parody article from nationalliberal.org saying that a fat rights activist, body positivity activist, Marge Swanson, died of complications with her body due to the obesity. She had been an advocate for fat rights and body acceptance, fat acceptance, this whole silly movement that we have online, which is partly trolls and partly just third wave feminist weirdness going on. And partly I would say that there is something positive about it in the sense that, well, no matter how you look or what body you are, it helps to begin by being happy with yourself. I mean, we all deserve that in some sense. I think we're much harder on ourselves than we are with other people. In the same way that online we will spit things out at each other that we would never say to one another in person. Even with my friends getting into partisan stuff, there's people that I know in my hometown or wherever where I see them and I'm much more willing to say something mean online than I would face to face, and that's true for all of us, I would say. But anyway, this bogus article has been posted on different message boards and it's been taken literally, and it's amazing how people can eat this shit up and they think that it's real. I mean, no, it's clearly fake. If you read it, I'll put the description link below, or if you encounter this, I mean, immediately question it. Which isn't to say, okay, I imagine there are fat activists who die early deaths, and anyone who takes pride in being obese and goes through not doing anything to check that. I mean, watching your diet is something that everyone needs to do no matter what size or shape you are. People advocate, well, I'm still beautiful even though I eat all this ice cream, all this pizza every day, whatever. I think that's a bad idea. But when we think about these fat acceptance activists and all that, like, death is sort of random. To get back to the original point of death, one thing I learned when I worked at a nursing home, to fill you in, when my first career was in social work, and I graduated with my bachelor's in social work, and I immediately, right after that, I started working at a nursing home, and I was among the very old and the dying and often the dead, and I spent my days interviewing them, testing them, giving them, or reading to them, or helping the doctors diagnose them, doing legal stuff. And one thing that I've learned is that there seem to be an equal number of fat people and drinkers, smokers. It's sort of, there is a crapshoot element to it, that you can find people who have had very unhealthy lifestyles who end up aging pretty well anyway, who end up living quite long regardless. Which isn't to say that you should do these things, but there is kind of a crapshoot element to it. And it's all about odds. It's all about reducing your odds. This is the actuarial science that I should have studied if I were any skilled at math. I could be making much more money doing that. But anyway, you shouldn't take that risk. It's sort of like the Bible says that the angels will watch over you lest you dash your foot on a stone. Of course, God is fair and protective with us, but God also states very plainly that there are consequences to hard living. Which brings me to my next point. I wanted to talk about Layne Staley, the lead singer of Alice in Chains. Now, Alice in Chains is one of those bands that I never really got into. It was always background noise, or I would hear it on the radio. I knew they were popular. And I kind of liked their songs. I would sing along to them a little bit to the extent that I could when I heard them on the radio, in the school bus or whatever. But just like Gin Blossoms, which is something that I always heard on the radio when I was a kid back in the 90s, it's much darker than I thought it was, this band. And that's evidence in the life of their lead singer, Layne Staley, who died at the age of 34. And he was found 2 weeks after he died in his chair, his body decomposed next to a crack pipe. And his loss, his end, and the fact that he was pathetically discovered just only a few years after the height of his fame, passed out on his chair and decomposed and unrecognizable. They had to use dental records to confirm that it was him. I mean, that just goes to show how tragic that life really, really was. And even though he made a great contribution, and lately, I don't know what it is, but like, you ever get that feeling where you just really like listening to a rock band, so you go through and you listen to all their albums over and over. I've been on a total Alice in Chains kick as trying to understand this man and trying to understand his music. And his voice is really phenomenal. Like, of all the grunge singers, he is clearly the best. And one of the greatest singers in rock and roll, probably, out there with Freddie Mercury. I'm not even kidding. You know, he was really, really amazing. But in spite of that talent and that genius, and even being coached into working with Mad Season, which was a band with sober musicians, sober grunge musicians who were trying to help him out of that, he still couldn't get his life together. And you read reports at the end of his days, and he would go to the bar and not even order a drink, would just pass out on a table, and he would do that every day. And he would disappear for weeks at a time and do nothing but just shoot heroin and play video games. And that reminds me, you know, the band name itself, Alice in Chains. His mother, who was a Christian Scientist, she was very upset with him for choosing that name because it had a bondage element to it. It's sort of like Smell the Glove, you know, the fake album cover in Spinal Tap, where you're using this image of bondage and it's seen as offensive and degrading towards women, when really, when you examine the band name, it's a lot like, I would say, the band name The Grateful Dead, in the sense that it's blind all the time I was learning to see. It's this sense that we praise nothingness, we praise putting ourselves in chains, whether it's the chains of, well, especially, I guess, regarding the Grateful Dead and Alice in Chains, it's the chain of drug addiction. We're trying to feel free by giving ourselves this completely irrational, unhealthy way of dealing with that. It's this attitude for the sake of attitude. It's like bad is good, you know. It's like evil is cool. Evil is just live spelled backwards, right? It's all that corny nonsense. So Alice in Chains, you think of Alice in Wonderland. You know, it's the story of Alice going out into this fantastic, fantastic, colorful world where there's all these strange creatures and all that. And she has this great adventure, and really, you know, you look at Go Ask Alice, or the band name Alice in Chains, and it's really just, you think you're going into this wonderful, alternate reality, whether it's on heroin or DMT or whatever, when really you're just trapping yourself deeper in your physical form. And I wonder to what extent his drug addiction, to what extent his obsession with that came to rejecting his parents. Something wrong must have gone there. To be raised in a Christian Science home, which has this great emphasis on not doing drugs, on trusting spirituality, not falling into the idolatry that can chain you quite literally, whether it's on whatever drug or whatever addiction or whatever sin that you are caught in. It's all different forms of idolatry. It's all different forms of wanting what you shouldn't have. It's all different forms of taking God and putting God into a small substance and using that to justify losing your life over it, of quashing the infinity, of smashing the infinite down into little matter. And now the ashes of Lane Staley are in a box owned by his mother. And she is one Christian Scientist that I would love to interview. But of course, I'm just some guy. I mean, I don't know. I would never reach out to her or anything. I respect her privacy. But what a strange outcome for the son of a Christian Scientist to end up so demented and destroyed on drugs. And that's really tragic. But anyway, and also, a closing point, being 34 years old and dying. When I was younger, if I had heard that, I would have thought, oh, he had a full life. He did everything he needed. But really, a sad thing about getting so far into this band and really getting obsessed with their music and loving this music, and even in my own life, taking up the grunge look, growing out the beard and the hair and all that, like going through a grunge phase. It's like, oh, if only he were still around, if only he could have lived on to reach irrelevance or obscure, or if only he could go through that aging process that great rock stars go through. But even older rock stars fall victim to that. There was Prince with fentanyl, and David Bowie, smoking cigarettes is bad for you. Come on, let's face it. And that was his whole shtick. He always had a cigarette in his mouth. Anyway, sad stuff. I'm not dead. 34 years old and I'm not dead. And honestly, I don't even think my life is half over. I'm going for 120, 130 years, possibly living immortally. Who's to say that's not possible? I mean, there's a lot to think about in the future. I mean, maybe we'll overcome death. I mean, death itself is a mystery. It's a medical mystery. No one quite knows why it happens, and it can never be predicted when it happens. But we can do safe things. We can live healthy. We can be safe drivers. The rumor of my death was because some South African, I believe, had a fatal accident near my home in Hanoi, and people were freaking out about it, and they wanted to contact me. I know it's belated, but yesterday was my day off, and I've been having fun all weekend, and I've been with people and doing things and interacting and living and breathing and feeling, and so I don't always get to YouTube as much as I say I would. And whenever I say that I'm going to be on that I'm going to make broadcasts every day, I always mess up with it. And so I know I've even added a few subscribers this last week, and I've been promising people, oh yeah, lots of content or whatever. But it's just a vlog, it's just a hobby. And I will keep producing content. It's always encouraging to see lots of views on my channel. But please hit that subscribe button for more Cenk Ajabo, and thanks as always for listening. Over and out.